Today we're going to be installing the Atlas transfer case into our Jeep LJ plate. And then we're going to start with removing the engine skid. Next, we're going to get the transmission mount loosened up. Once you get those loose, you want to make sure you have the transmission supported, and then we'll take off the skid. Alright guys, with the transfer case out, you can see wiring connector 1, 2, speedo sensor. If you've got a 231, it's going to be a little different. Shifter linkage, and these are the 6 nuts that you're taking out. What I did is laid out both transfer cases, the old and new, next to each other on the bench. Kind of mimicked clocking how they're going to be sitting in the Jeep. Try to keep drive shaft angles as close as possible and maintain the same clearance top and bottom. From there we were able to determine that what we wanted to do was set up our studs in the kind of middle bolt hole position on the Atlas. So now we'll go over tightening those up. To tighten the studs, thread in finger tight, and then I'm actually using the stock nuts from the stock transfer case. All you need is just 3/8 fine thread. Just tighten them up until they're tight, and then you can thread in the stud. Alright guys, for the shifter you're going to start with this bracket. One thing Atlas instructions say is that the Allen bolts have a thread sealant, which I do not see looking in the case. So all I'm going to do is just put a little dab of RTV inside each hole. Same thing on the bolts, just to make sure. I have no idea if they need it or not. But this you want to install before putting the transfer case in the vehicle. So we're going to put the sealant on, since this will be the final install for them. Alright, once you have that on, the next step you're going to most likely do with it in the vehicle. I'm going to show everything out of the vehicle. You're going to install this all thread jam nut. Alright, so once you get the all thread in, you're going to have your first jam nut. Then you've got your shifter mount. Keep in mind this has to be clocked a certain way. When you slide this in, it's going to look like this. You do not want to slide it in this way. So we're going to slide that on. Then you've got a second nut. Again, just going to I'm just doing this out of the vehicle, that way you can get a better feel for what's going to have to get installed. Since when we put it in the vehicle, you won't be able to see much of this with the transmission tunnel. So once you have that, you're going to have these bolts that'll slide through. And then you've got your shifters that'll attach. And with the Loctite, I'm just going to do these very loose, just to give everybody an idea. All right, so for removal of the shifter, got your transmission shifter. Cup holders are just going to slide out. Shifter bezel. This, you can remove your shift knob if you want to remove it. You don't have to. And then your cup holder, you have a 10mm bolt. And once you get that out, the shifter will be free. The shift bezel, I should say, will be free. So you can remove that. All right, so we got the Atlas installed. Everything seemed to be made it up real easy. Trying to get you guys a good profile shot. You can see it just barely hangs below the transmission. I think that's going to be right along the same as the factory transfer case. Getting ready to pull the skid plate back on, mock up that, and then we'll measure out drive shafts. All right, for measuring your drive shaft, you're going to go from the center of that yoke to the center of the yoke on the transfer case. As far as like the center of where your U-joint would be. So I've got 34.5, and you want to measure this while you've got the suspension completely compressed. And then again at full droop, that way you can see the entire change. So I've got 34.5 while it's drooped, or while it's compressed right now. And then when I have it at full droop, just because of the arc of the suspension geometry, then I'm at 32.5. So I've got about 2 inches of drive shaft movement, which isn't much. They're going to add a yoke that's got at least 4 inches of travel there. So we've got the shifter mocked up. We've got the 1/2 inch all thread with the shifter bracket, and then our shifter's in place. Advanced Adapters never did send us the 3/8 all thread that goes between your shift lever and your shifter, or your shift rod and your shifter. So we've been trying to come up with a way to make this work while we're waiting for parts, but we've been waiting for over a week and getting tired. So first thought we did was try some 5/16 all thread just to get stuff mocked up, and we could get it mocked up where it could work. The all thread that's 3/8 is a fine thread. It's 24 threads per inch versus most of it is, I believe, 16 as far as what you can get locally. So instead of waiting for Advanced Adapters to send these out whenever they feel, I decided I was going to take a 3/8 bolt, since I can't source anything locally for all thread, and just machine down one end to fit through here, and then I can thread it into the shift rod itself. So we're going to head over to the lathe and go ahead and get that machine down and go from there. The shifters are in. I ended up taking the bolt that we machined down We've got plastic sleeves here, that way for the push-pull, that bolt's not going to move, and then it's threaded into the insert on the back side. So both shifters are operating as they should. I did leave the sleeve up here out for right now. I just want to make sure these shifters are going to work the way that they're supposed to. If they're not working correctly, then I'll end up having to wait for that all thread to get here from Advanced Adapters. But I'm happy with the placement of everything there. Went ahead and got the shifters up through the floor. I think placement is good on them. All right, guys, we're putting the skid plate back in. One thing I'm going to do is add a little dab of anti-seize to these bolts. What I've done is just chase the threads, made sure I got them cleaned up out of any rust, and then we are just going to make it easier if we ever have to pull these down. These bolts are pretty susceptible. These bolts end up getting rusted out most of the time, and creates a big hassle of having to weld new nuts on the inside of the frame. So a little extra step. Anytime you take down this skid plate, add a dab of anti-seize. You'll thank me later. Alright guys, for the first time in about 2 weeks, I've got the skid plate out, or the jack stand out. The skid plate is back on, and just wanted to show some of the clearances that I have. So if you look, it's kind of hard to get a good spot on the video, but I've got maybe a 1/4 inch between the Atlas and the tummy tuck, and then up top as far as the body, probably about an inch and a half maybe left. So the Atlas just barely fit without doing any sort of modifications to the tub. Try to get an angle from the front here, see if that's any better for everybody. Here's an angle from the front of the transfer case. Looks like it's kind of hitting the skid plate in the picture, but we've got about a 1/4 inch sitting there. And then again at the top of the transfer case, it's tough to show you on film, but about a 1/2 inch in the front of the case. Alright guys, final video for the Atlas install. This is probably over half the reason that I installed it, was to do front digs. So we've got the transfer case right now in rear wheel high. I'm going to shift that into neutral. Front is in low, rear is in neutral, and now we're going to do a probably, I don't know, 3rd gear. And if I just go and no burn, just kind of ease out and do my turn. Not quite as tight. Now when I lock up my e-brake here in a second, we can really get it to spin around real quick. Hope you guys liked the video. Make sure to hit like, subscribe. Stay tuned for more.